Welcome and good morning, everybody. Thank you, Paula, for that first piece of exciting Russian music by Prokofiev, to be followed shortly by more Prokofiev and music of Rachmaninoff. My name is Bill Dalsimer, your service leader today. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of San Miguel de Allende, located on the high desert at 6,200 feet in the heart of Mexico. We are especially honored to have that you have chosen to spend this morning with us, and extend a warm welcome to friends new and old, and especially warm welcome to those of you who are joining us for the first time. Thank you for coming, and we look forward to getting to know one another and to seeing you at future services. While our minister, the Reverend Tom Rosiello, is not with us in person today, I recommend you read his letter of January 7th to members and friends dealing with the events of this past week. That letter will be found on our website and in our newsletter shortly. Our tent is a large one. Regardless of your religious traditions or lack of any, your race, your culture, your gender identity, or your sexual orientation, you are welcome here. We encourage you to bring your questioning mind and your expansive heart to share in fellowship, reflection, and great music. Enter and come in. It's my honor to tell you about today's lay speaker, a member of this fellowship. Frank Thoms has been a teacher for more than 40 years in Hanover, New Hampshire, Worcester, Massachusetts, Leningrad, Moscow, Alma-Ata, and Kazakhstan. His book, Behind the Red Veil, An American Inside Gorbachev's Russia, based on his Russian teaching experience, and 8 trips to the former Soviet Union and 1 to New Russia, presents his understanding of the Russians. Frank and his wife, artist Kathleen Camarata, moved to San Miguel 9 years ago. Together, let us embrace this new and glorious day as we begin our service by lighting our chalice, a symbol of our Unitarian Universalist denomination. Well, I'll have to use the old-fashioned way. Our chalice is one of hope and our honest and responsible search for truth and meaning. We join together to make this world a brighter, kinder place for all humankind. And now to our fellowship's president, Dan Neuspiel.
Thank you. Good morning. I'd like to offer a few thoughts from our COVID-19 task force, a group of health professionals and care team members with expertise we hope will be helpful during this pandemic, which rages on in San Miguel and elsewhere. Now, despite our best efforts to be safe, several of our fellowship members and friends have already contracted COVID. So we'd like to explore the concept of safety, which seems to mean different things to different people. To us, being safe means avoiding all interactions with non-household members without effective masks and physical distancing in a setting with good airflow. At this time, we recommend you use either KN95 masks or double surgical masks, both of which are widely available. Being safe means staying home unless it's absolutely necessary to go out. It means avoiding eating at restaurants and shopping. And there are several good options for home food delivery. Being safe means avoiding taxis and Ubers, but if you absolutely must use them, be sure all the windows are wide open, front and back. In tomorrow's newsletter, I'll share information on home delivery of groceries. Also, those of you with SkyMed evacuation insurance should be aware that a COVID transportation option is now available. Please raise your safety level and stay well. And now please join me in singing hymn number 134, Our World is One World. The words will appear on your screen in just a moment. Please join me in reciting our spoken covenant, which should appear on your screen momentarily. We respect the interdependent web of life and work for a just and peaceful world. We encourage the search for truth and meaning, strive for compassion in our relationships, and seek values that will benefit our lives and the lives of others. This is our covenant.
Respetamos todos los estilos de vida dentro de su red interdependiente y trabajamos por un mundo justo y pacífico. Alentamos la búsqueda de la verdad y la comprensión total. Nos esforzamos por mantener compasión en nuestras relaciones y buscamos valores que beneficien nuestras vidas y las vidas de los demás. Este es nuestro convenio.
Good morning. My name is Mark Johaningsmeir, and we share with you in this very special part of the service. Although it may seem that we are dispersed and separated by the needs of social distancing or by geographical distance, we still are bonded together more than ever. In these moments, we share some of our most pressing thoughts and feelings. Some people have sent in their joys or concerns to Reverend Tom Rossiello during this week. And you may do that now by typing it into the chat box that you'll find at the bottom of your screen. Our first candle symbolizes both joy and the desire for ongoing care for Bobby Freeze. She has been a friend of many in our fellowship. Bobby, you may know, has rescued more than 350 dogs in San Miguel. She has nursed them back to health at her shelter. And I want to say that Judith and I have one of Bobby's rescues. Several weeks ago, Bobby was very ill. She was hospitalized and required a ventilator. Now she's breathing on her own. She was discharged from the hospital and now is recovering. May she continue her healing journey toward full recovery. A candle of thanks. The UU COVID-19 Task Force and the UU Fellowship Care Team, along with the entire congregation, express our deep gratitude for Joey Merrifield and the SMA screening team. We especially are grateful for the work that they have been doing with the ever increasing number of COVID cases. Thank you. And now a candle for the people who are ill today with the coronavirus, and those who are mourning those who have died. This candle represents concern for Diana Thornhill Miller. Diana suffered a heart attack this week. In a message that she sent out, she describes her attack as minor. And I don't know if that means this was tongue-in-cheek. At any rate, she's hospitalized in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I understand that she has had surgery scheduled for the implant of a stent, either sometime this weekend or tomorrow. Her husband, John Auld, is there with her. Diana created the brilliant leather mosaic mandala of the UU Chalice and Flame, which appears behind the pulpit when we meet in the Hotel Aldea. You may also on our web and many of our electronic communities. This week, people all over the world witnessed the violent invasion by a mob of the United States Capitol. We saw the attempted overthrow of the democratic process. These events have given rise to many thoughts and concerns. This candle is for the people killed and wounded in this violent attack. And this candle is for the well-being of the American Republic, on which the mob poured its contempt. This concern is all the more urgent given that the president and many officials in the White House and the Congress who gave encouragement to this shameful event are still in office and not yet facing consequences. This candle is for a related concern. As much as we were shocked, saddened, and angered by the events of this Wednesday, many of us are concerned about what may yet happen in the closing days of this president's term of office. This candle is for hope in a peaceful transition of power and for the new administration as it addresses the immense challenges that they will face. And a final candle to represent all of the joys and concerns that have not been articulated here, but are present in your thoughts and feelings. What follows now is a meditative piano piece by 20th century Russian composer Sergei Prokofiev, performed by Paula.
As we gather today to nourish our spirits, count our blessings, and look forward to a new year of greater health, it is important to remember that 60% of San Miguelenses are living below the poverty level. A third of them are children. One local organization that this fellowship supports has taken a lead on providing food for those children, and because of the pandemic, their families as well. You know them by their mission, Feed the Hungry. With our grant, Feed the Hungry purchases and distributes nutritious food for 20,000 families in 9 colonias each week at a cost of only 10 cents per meal. If school reopens during the pandemic, their food costs will rise from last year's $50,000 a month to more than $150,000 a month as Feed the Hungry continues with both their school lunch program and their emergency family food program. In addition, Feed the Hungry offers nutritional education and support to mothers on subjects like diabetes, which affects about 25% of the Mexican population. So Feed the Hungry is working in the prevention as well as the cure aspects of nutritional health. Feed the Hungry relies almost exclusively on private donations, and they are committed to continue their Herculean efforts for as long as they have funds. So, before you have lunch today, please consider how many children and families a donation to this fellowship could feed. On behalf of the neediest children and their families of San Miguel, thank you. If you value these religious services and want to continue supporting the work of the NGOs we fund, please donate generously. During the upcoming video and musical offering, please go to our donation link. The information will be posted on your screen. Thank you so much for your generosity.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and by this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and by this we live.
This morning's reading. This reading is from my book, Behind the Red Veil, An American Inside Gorbachev's Russia. I came from a country that Russian children knew about from its newspapers, Pravda and Izvestia, and from Vremya, state television, and from textbooks and political information classes. They read about Wall Street, skyscrapers, and about unemployed homeless wrapped in cardboard lying on grates in the winter's cold. There was no middle ground. I saw myself as that middle ground, a bridge where they could discover about America from an American who listened to them. They could digest his words for themselves. They had to chase a curriculum that eluded them, that was impossible to master. They had to retell one lesson after another, with no time for speculation. And in nearly all those lessons, they had to stand to speak, which left no opportunity for conversation. I offered relief from that tediousness. Good morning. I am so pleased to be here. Well, on Zoom anyway. And after this week's most tragic events, I want to step away and share with you my relationship and love with people from another culture, in this case, Russians. While I was there more than 30 years ago, I believe we can learn much from my experiences. I came to the USSR in its last days, first as a tourist in October 1985, the year Mikhail Gorbachev became General Secretary of the Communist Party, or in our understanding, President of the USSR. That trip was the first of 8 from 1985 to 1994, and nearly a year of my life in which I sought to know the Russian people. I taught English in 4 schools in 3 cities. And in 1986 and 1987, I was selected as a US-Soviet exchange teacher in Leningrad, and I bonded on my own with another school in Moscow. In July of 1990, unexpectedly, I served as a counselor for high school students from the United States. We participated in an international pioneer camp in Almaty, Kazakhstan, right next to the border of China. We were together with Soviets and with Japanese. During the time at the camp, I proposed to come back to Almaty and teach in one of its schools. The following January through April, I succeeded teaching there, my 4th Soviet school. My last trip headed into the new Russia in July 1994, 3 years after the fall of communism. I went to Yekaterinburg, Siberia. I led a seminar for teachers who would be coming to America. I had hoped to return to St. Petersburg this past spring, but alas, COVID intervened. I came to the Soviet Union to be with Russians, not to brag about my country, not to proselytize, not to judge, but to be with them. I intended to be myself, hoping the Russians would be themselves. I wanted to stand on common ground, commingling in respect with one another, where we would listen and learn from each other, and perhaps come to love one another. I discovered at the center of my efforts lay 3 Unitarian Universalist principles. The first principle: I came to the USSR to seek the dignity and worth of every person I met. The fourth principle: in our interactions, I let down my personal guard to invoke with Russians a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And the seventh principle: I discovered the interdependent web of existence of which we, then Soviet communists, and me were a part. I want to share with you how my Russian obsession began. My commitment to Russia and the Soviet Union emerged from my teaching life. I signed my first contract in 1962 in Hanover, New Hampshire. I arrived on John Kennedy's coattails, ready to revitalize the teaching profession. By the grace of God, or whoever had anything to say about it, I was fortunate to meet my first department head, mentor, and friend, Delmar Goodwin. He asked me in the spring of my first year to move from the 9th grade in the high school to the 8th grade in the junior high to teach about Marx, Russia, and the communist Soviet Union. Make Marx and the Soviets real, he said to me. Be honest about who they are. Don't teach that socialism and communism are evil. Have the kids come to acknowledge these ways of life. Millions of people throughout the world do. Delmar's charge opened my obsession with all things Russian. Setting the stage with my 8th graders, I darkened my classroom, pulled down the shades, and turned off half the lights, making the room feel like an inner sanctum. My unsuspecting students stepped in and hesitantly pondered the change. Why is this room dark? They may well have asked. Is Mr. Thoms about to do something strange? For 2 months, I practically proselytized Marxist socialism and Soviet communism. For the next 20 years, I returned often to Marx and the Soviets, each decade a different approach, always aiming for them to internalize these ideologies and understand their legitimacy. As far as I know, none of these students has become a communist. Many have said, however, years later, that I taught them how to think. I couldn't have asked for a better tribute. After Mikhail Gorbachev arrived in 1985, the USSR and the US began to have many cultural exchanges. Visiting Soviets even came to my classroom. I decided now it was my turn to travel behind the Iron Curtain, to meet Russian people, to meet real Russians, living behind what I would later call the Red Veil, the face of communism that the Soviet Communist Party projected onto its citizens, onto foreign visitors, and onto the world at large. And I wanted to penetrate the outer layer of the matryoshka, Russian souvenir nesting dolls, to find the inner layers of Russian life, not shown to the average tourist. In October 1985, I signed on for a 2-week tour to Leningrad, Kiev, and Moscow, which had been arranged through Intourist, the official Soviet travel agency. But I was determined to escape Intourist cocoon and see what I would not be allowed to see, to go behind the Red Veil, to find my way inside the Soviet matryoshka. So, what did I learn about the Russian people? And what does my telling you about people I met more than 30 years ago have to say about any of us today? You'll have to decide for yourself as I share these recollections of that extraordinary time and of the extraordinary Russian people I met. Let's begin at the beginning, October 1985, my first contact with a Russian on Russian soil. Within 20 minutes of our arrival at Leningrad's International Airport, an attractive woman with flailing wild curls and 2 beautiful children by her side stepped in front of me. Before we departed, after having a fractured conversation in Russian and English, she handed me a crinkled scrap of brown paper with her name, Natasha, and her telephone number. On Sunday, 2 days later, after a lunch of a delicious pea salad with borscht, being inside her disheveled but cozy flat, I was having a glimpse of an inner layer of the matryoshka. We formed a friendship, which we rekindled whenever I returned to Leningrad. The day before lunch with Natasha, you won't believe this story, it was Saturday. I had slipped away from the tour's scheduled visit to a Russian monastery. I walked to the Nevsky Prospect, the Broadway of Leningrad. I was intending to find 2 Dartmouth students to give them gifts, little mini teddy bears from their friends at home. While I'm on the street with my big camera bag looking around, I spied 2 men coming towards me. I was already worried because I was warned from my guide not to deal with people, probably black marketers like them. Anyway, I told them to deflect them. I told them the story about wanting to find the girls. And they said, we are going to be meeting those girls tonight. Oh, right, I said to myself. Nina, our babushka leader, really, I remembered, had warned us about such things. In this city of 5 million people, these 2 men emphatically insisted they knew these girls and that they would be having dinner with them that evening. No way, I said to myself, it's just not possible. However, I decided to trust them. What other choice did I have? And you know what? My trust bore out. These guys did know these girls, and we did have a delicious dinner at a private restaurant. And again, I experienced another inner layer of the Russian matryoshka, a part of the Russia that a tourist would never have allowed me to see. In Kiev, our second city, on a back street, I met Lara, a young Russian with dark hair and dark eyes, and listened to her lament about her addiction to heroin. It never occurred to me that drugs would have been an epidemic in the Soviet Union. Lara had brought me inside yet another inner layer of the matryoshka of Russian life. In Moscow, our last city, I had the unexpected privilege to observe a young pioneer girl in the city's large palatial palace of young pioneers. It was for selected teenage Soviets, a show-off place for tourists in front of the Red Veil, but where I managed to see beneath it in an unguarded moment. As I write in my book, taking a breath from rushing through the palace, I stepped away from my tour group. It had become a habit. I stopped on a landing and peered through a picture window into a large, darkened room. A young pioneer girl with light brown hair and braids, about 10, stood alone in the near corner. She was in her brown school uniform with white apron, wearing her Lenin pin. She was standing before a dozen dolls, sitting at miniature desks. As other tourists raced up and down, I stopped on a landing to observe her. She revealed a curious intensity, directing her children with attentive, quizzical, scowling looks. She didn't notice me. She was internalizing a Soviet teacher's demeanor, a deep sense of purpose, devotion, control, parental posture, in charge. A Soviet teacher served as a surrogate parent for the state and assumed full responsibility for the patriotic character of her students. Would this child become a teacher? This young pioneer was a product of a conformist culture, cloning the actions of her teachers and emulating them well. Yet she was alone in this room, in a glorious palace, where groups of other pioneers were giving their demonstrations in bright rooms, behind picture glass windows for hundreds of visitors to admire. Maybe, just maybe by being alone, this young pioneer child inside this massive palace of pioneers was secretly nurturing her own seed, choosing what she wanted for her own satisfaction and without pretense. I could tell you countless stories of my time with Russians, but to whet your appetite, I invite you to step behind the red veil with me and listen to some of the voices of the Russian people whom I befriended. These vignettes will take you into the inner layers of the Russian matryoshka and to see Russians as people, not as communists. From the remarkable director of my first school, number 185 in Leningrad, Elvira Nikolaevna, in a conversation that took place in her cabinet, her office. Herself a communist, her husband KGB, she struggled with Gorbachev's policies. Morality is limping today, Frank. Gorbachev's perestroika, even 7-year-olds want it. We need to develop the culture of thinking. School should be a proper school, practically. She often said that word. We should build morality before democracy. She continued her rant. Demonstrations, such glasnost actions are against teachers and workers. We got the crazy idea from the West and we adopt it like it is tacked on. It is better for people to work than to protest. They are just lazy. Elvira spoke openly with me, this time about Gorbachev's reforms, perestroika, his government and economic policies, and glasnost, openness. But she did not always say all that she knew. She was respected and feared by staff, students, and parents. Sometimes in our frequent conversations, she spoke as if we were in front of the red veil. Other times, she seemed to step behind it, but as I discovered later, only on her terms. From the English department head at school number 185, Irina Nikolaevna, no relation to Elvira, she was my supervisor and confidant. She often called me her cousin. This incident happened after I put a copy of Animal Farm on her desk in the late afternoon. The next day, I was wandering the halls and Irina ran up to me and said, Frank, I must see you after school. I must see you. And I was nervous, wondering what I might have done wrong. Something must have happened. And when I got to her office, she said right away, holding the book in her hand, I do not know where to begin, Frank. I read this last night. I could hardly sleep. I cannot keep it on my bookshelf. She was nearly in tears. As I read it, she said, I recalled the horrible time in our society and during the war. I don't want to remember it. I can't put the book on my bookshelf, Frank. I simply can't. I can't keep it. In Animal Farm, Orwell never mentioned Russia, the Soviet Union, Stalin, or Trotsky. And oh, I wanted not to have given her that book. Yet somehow her response had brought us closer together. Irina was being the person she had been with me, not only open and honest, but now vulnerable. In one of my frequent conversations with an upper level student at school number 185, she was confident, smart, and candid. When I was teaching in another school, I complained to her, I can't believe these students in my other school all speak about America with one voice. They speak of America propagating the arms race, inflicting capitalist oppression, invoking imperialist aggression, creating massive unemployment, and putting countless homeless in the streets. No matter what age, they all say the same thing about America. That's so frustrating. She looked at me, dropped her eyes, and then looked up. There's a difference between what we want to say and what we need to say. Wisdom from a 16-year-old. Again, speaking with her, I asked, did the teachers know that you had cards in your pocket to use for cheating in your exam? Sure they did, she said confidently. They knew. The director knew for sure, but looked the other way. She demonstrated by putting her hand next to her eyes like a blinder, her fingers spread, turning her head. It's called smatrit skavois palsy, to look through the fingers, but not see. From maverick teacher Zoya Anatolievna, tall in sneakers with rolled up white socks and round plastic rimmed glasses, I befriended Zoya at Moscow School number 21. Teachers know that students come to exams with crib sheets, Frank. Cheating is not a problem, she said, looking me in the eye. If the teacher looks the other way, they know, but as long as they don't see, it does not become a problem. Besides, students in preparing their crib sheets, they are learning. Another voice on a related matter. Of course we prompt each other in class, Mr. Frank, said Nikolai, a young, wise for his age friend from the 8th form at school number 185. Prompting, it is the process in class where classmates whispered aloud to support one of their own who was struggling to answer a teacher's question. It's an important part of our schooling, Nikolai continued. Without it, our class would not be able to get its work done. It's important to help my friends, more important than helping myself. Such cheating and prompting, which I heard about many times, had its own caveat. In every instance, from Tallinn, Estonia in the west to Almaty, Kazakhstan in the east, students would help their classmates. It illustrated the commitment to the collective in Soviet society. And it was the only way to keep up with a rigid and lengthy curriculum, which students had to chase every day in every class. In my 4th school, in Almaty, Kazakhstan, 1991, 3 time zones away from Moscow, I luckily discovered a group of 16-year-olds eager to get away from chasing the Soviet curriculum. They insisted with me on having discussions on such topics as the afterlife and reincarnation. And I was most grateful for their English teacher who allowed me to be with them while I was at her school. This opportunity, in turn, opened me to become a different teacher self, a new place in my own matryoshka. With these students, I felt respected for who I was. Each time we met, we became closer. We spoke of things that mattered, ate apples in class, slid down a snow trail on plastic bags filled with plastic bags between our legs, and laughed in a chilly bus on our way home. With them, my role of teacher as entertainer could rest. My ego could rest as well. I could be me, and that was enough. Despite lapses since then, and there have been plenty, that self hopefully has remained. I sit at my desk writing this, no pretensions, just me writing. And from the buoyant, charismatic, exuberant director of the international camp at Almaty, Pavel Koznevnikov, he explained the way of getting things done inside Soviet's cumbersome bureaucracies. It's expressed by the knight in chess, which when moved, the opponent does not know where it will land. We think one way, say another, and do the third. In October 1988, in my conversation with feisty, sharp, yet gentle English language teacher Kristi Tarand at Tallinn's Estonia School number 7, She lowered her eyes and commiserated. There's a very bad need for learning, Frank. And now when an organ of man is not used to it, it atrophies, she said wearily. This has happened to the brain. When everybody says what you must do next, your brain doesn't work when suddenly you have to decide for yourself. We are so used to doing things we are told. We need to start putting our brains to work. But it is very hard for teachers, not because we are afraid or pessimistic, but because we do not have enough information, not enough knowledge. We do not know. We do not know. What happens when the dignity and worth of individuals are sacrificed for the powers that be? Christie understood this. Her words portended the return of state television under Putin, a one point of view information sharing, again ensuring the brain would atrophy. Without multiple sources, without encouragement to think, Russians are again being lured to be mouthpieces for the state. And if I may, Christie's words point to present-day America, with the plethora of disinformation, of soundbite broadcasting, for example, Fox and Breitbart News, and the dark web, and smartphones that skim unprocessed information from phone to phone, like pebbles skipping across a stream. What are people retaining? What are our children learning to develop their long-term memories necessary for critical thinking? What information will people have to be able to make informed decisions? These questions linger. And finally, a most prescient insight also arrived in October 1988 from teacher Raisa Vladimirovna of school number 185. It was our last conversation when she shared with me her views about the Soviet Union under Stalin. Here is an excerpt. You know, Frank, you can do whatever you want with people everywhere. That's the most tragic thing. You can turn people into a crowd, then into a herd, and lead them wherever you want. It can happen in any country, in yours as well, unfortunately. You know, it is like wishful thinking. When you don't want to see, you don't see. When you don't want to know, you don't know. To reiterate Raisa's wisdom, when you don't want to see, you don't see. And when you don't want to know, you don't know. Little did I realize at the time how prescient Raisa's words were. Raisa Vladimirovna was beyond remarkable. She chastised her students, but loved them deeply. Single, she took in troubled children. She was beloved. I was fortunate to have her as a very, very dear friend. Unfortunately, Raisa has since died. Well, I have shared with you my love and appreciation of Russians. We've stepped behind the red veil together into inner layers of the matryoshkas of these Russians, and briefly of my own matryoshka, an American teacher and seeker who lived among them. Together, we reveled in a shared search for truth and meaning and a recognition of the interdependent web of which we were a part. My relationships with Russians had become unwritten contracts in which each of us trusted the other to speak honestly in our encounters. And the more I came to know them, the more I fell in love with them. I have taken responsibility to speak with you compassionately because they opened their hearts and minds countless times in countless circumstances, and they opened mine. Let's all join together in singing this wonderful UU hymn, We Would Be One, to the familiar tune of Finlandia by Sibelius. I hope you have taken away an understanding that the world's peoples are part of one family. To know each other better, we need to push beyond first impressions, to go behind the red veil, so to speak. We need to find bridges where we can come to know one another, respect one another, and find ways to live together as one family. We can then better care for each other. It has been a privilege to have been among you, even at this distance. Thank you.
Speaker Nancy Pelosi quoted from her favorite prayer, one attributed to the 12th century saint, St. Francis of Assisi, in reconvening the House of Representatives this week. Our minister, Tom Rosiello, quotes these words as well in his closing letter of January 7 to members and friends. So we extinguish our chalice today with slightly modified words of St. Francis of Assisi. May we be an instrument of peace. Where there is hatred, let us bring love. Where there is offense, let us bring pardon. Where there is discord, let us bring union. Where there is error, let us bring truth. Where there is doubt, let us bring faith. Where there is despair, let us bring hope. Where there is darkness, let us bring light. Where there is sadness, let us bring joy. May it be so. Go in peace.
Blessed days and the dark secret night, and I think to myself,